Hey, welcome to Things You Don't Know. We're going to be doing something interesting today. We're talking about impeachment. Now, impeachment is one of the serious powers given to Congress by the Constitution, but it is also one of the most misunderstood. Now, only three presidents in American history have actually been impeached by the House of Representatives. And, it's a little bit more of a complex policy than that. So, Dr. Dineen, could you kind of define the process for us here quickly?
My pleasure, Dr. Weaver. Impeachment proceedings are a formal legislative process to charge a government official with wrongdoing, consisting of investigation and charges by the House of Representatives, followed by a trial and potential removal by the Senate.
Now, to be clear here, the House of Representatives makes the charge, and the Senate, by a three-quarters majority, potentially potentially removes the accused from office.
Thank you, guys. I think that that's really important to remember.
Three presidents have faced this: Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump.
That's exactly right, Dr. Dineen. So, and Trump is unique because he was impeached twice. So there have been actually four presidential impeachments, but they were involving only three presidents.
And despite all four impeachments, no American president has ever been removed from office by the Senate after an impeachment trial.
We need to remember impeachment and removal are two different things. The House of Representatives decides whether to impeach. It only takes a simple majority.
Now, think of the impeachment like somewhat like an indictment. It formally accuses the president of wrongdoing.
Then the Senate conducts a trial presided over by the Chief Justice. Conviction and removal require a two-thirds vote of all senators present.
And throughout American history, getting that two-thirds majority has proved extremely difficult.
Now, let's talk about our first case of impeachment here. Now, the first president ever to be impeached was Andrew Johnson, and his case grew out of the enormous political conflict following the Civil War.
Yeah, Johnson became president in 1865 after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Although Johnson had remained loyal to the Union during the Civil War, he was a Southern Democrat from Tennessee, and his approach to Reconstruction quickly put him at odds with the Republican controlled Congress.
Many congressional Republicans wanted much stronger federal protections for formerly enslaved people and tougher conditions for former Confederate states before they were fully restored to the Union. Johnson favored a much more lenient Reconstruction policy he thought was Lincoln's. He wasn't entirely right.
The conflict became extremely bitter. Congress repeatedly passed Reconstruction legislation over Johnson's vetoes, and Johnson publicly attacked some of his congressional opponents.
The immediate trigger for impeachment was Johnson's attempt to remove Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. Now, Stanton supported the Congressional Reconstruction Program and had become one of Johnson's most troublesome political opponents inside his own administration.
Congress had passed the Tenure of Office Act, which attempted to prevent the president from removing certain federal officials without Senate approval. Johnson believed the law was unconstitutional.
Yes, he did. So he tried to remove Stanton anyway, and that gave his congressional enemies the confrontation they were waiting for.
Yep. The House approved 11 articles of impeachment. Most involved Johnson's alleged violation of the Tenure of Office Act, although the articles also accused him of improperly challenging Congress and bringing the presidency into disrepute.
The Senate trial became extremely tense because conviction required 36 votes. On the first article considered, the Senate voted 35 guilty and 19 not guilty.
Johnson survived by one vote.
After the same result occurred on two additional articles, the Senate abandoned the remaining votes.
Several Republican senators broke with their party. Some believed Johnson had behaved badly but worried that removing a president, essentially because Congress despised his policies, would weaken the independence of the presidency.
And there was another complication, too. If Johnson had been removed, Senate President pro tempore Benjamin Wade, a radical Republican, would likely have become acting president. Some senators considered Wade too politically extreme and may have been reluctant to put him in the White House.
Yeah, Johnson completed the remaining months of his term, although his political power was severely weakened.
Remarkably, another president would not be impeached for 130 years. The next president on that list was Bill Clinton.
That's right, and Clinton's impeachment grew out of a very different controversy. It began with investigations that eventually focused on Clinton's relationship with White House intern Monica Lewinsky.
Okay. Clinton was questioned under oath during a civil lawsuit filed by Paula Jones, a former Arkansas state employee who had accused him of sexual harassment. Questions were asked about whether Clinton had engaged in a sexual relationship with Lewinsky.
Clinton denied having a sexual relationship as the term was defined during the questioning. Independent counsel Kenneth Starr concluded that Clinton had lied under oath and attempted to interfere with the investigation.
So the constitutional question here was not simply whether the president had an affair. The issue became whether the president had committed perjury and obstruction of justice while trying to conceal it.
In December 1998, the Republican controlled House approved two articles of impeachment. One charged Clinton with perjury before a federal grand jury. The other charged him with obstruction of justice.
Two additional proposed articles failed in the House.
When the case reached the Senate, however, there was nowhere near enough removal support.
On the perjury charge, the Senate voted 45 guilty and 55 not guilty. On obstruction of justice, the vote was evenly divided, 50 guilty, 50 not guilty.
Both were well short of the 67 votes that would have been required if all 100 senators were voting.
Some senators concluded that Clinton had lied and behaved disgracefully, but still believed his actions did not justify overturning the results of a presidential election.
Others believed the charges were serious enough for removal, but politically, the votes simply weren't there.
Clinton remained in office and served until January 2001.
Okay, then came DJT, Donald Trump. His first impeachment occurred in December of 2019.
The controversy centered around Trump's dealings with the government of the Ukraine. At the time, former Vice President Joe Biden was emerging as a possible Democratic opponent in the 2020 presidential election.
Trump spoke by telephone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and urged Ukraine to pursue investigations involving Biden and Biden's son Hunter. At roughly the same time, hundreds of millions of dollars in congressionally approved military assistance to Ukraine had been temporarily withheld.
Critics accused Trump of using presidential power and foreign policy to obtain a political advantage against a domestic rival. Trump denied wrongdoing, as per usual, and argued that he was concerned about corruption in Ukraine.
The controversy became even more serious when the administration officials resisted congressional subpoenas and requests for testimony and documents. Doesn't that sound familiar?
The House ultimately approved two articles of impeachment. The first charged Trump with abuse of power. The second charged him with obstruction of Congress.
The House vote was highly partisan. No House Republican voted for either article.
And when the Senate trial concluded in February 2020, Trump was acquitted on abuse of power. The vote was 48 guilty and 52 not guilty. On obstruction of Congress, it was 47 guilty and 53 not guilty.
Republican Senator Mitt Romney voted guilty on the abuse of power article. This was historically significant.
Yeah, Romney became the first senator in American history to vote to convict and remove a president belonging to his own political party.
But one Republican vote was nowhere near enough to reach the two-thirds threshold. Trump remained in office.
Then, less than 1 year later, something happened that had never happened before. Donald Trump was impeached a second time.
This impeachment followed the disputed 2020 presidential election and Trump's attempts to challenge the result. Joe Biden had won the election, but Trump repeatedly claimed that widespread fraud had deprived him of victory.
And those claims were rejected by numerous courts, and state officials certified the election results. But Trump continually tried to overturn the outcome.
Yeah, on January the 6th, 2021, Congress assembled at the U.S. Capitol to count the Electoral College votes and formally certify Biden's victory. Trump addressed supporters near the White House that morning. He even said, we've got to march. And later, a mob attacked the Capitol.
Members of Congress were evacuated or sheltered as rioters breached the building, engaging in disgraceful and illegal behavior, temporarily stopping the electoral count. Congress returned later that evening and completed the certification.
1 week later, on January 13th, the House impeached Trump on a single charge: incitement of insurrection.
The article cited Trump's statements before January 6th, as well as his broader campaign to overturn the election result.
Trump's defenders argued that his speech was protected political rhetoric and he had not ordered anyone to attack the Capitol.
And this impeachment was also unusual because Trump's presidential term ended before the Senate trial began.
That created a major constitutional dispute. Some Republican senators argued that once Trump left office, the Senate no longer had constitutional authority to try or convict him.
Others argued that former officials could still be tried because conviction could be followed by a separate Senate vote disqualifying that person from holding federal office again.
And when the Senate finally voted, 57 senators voted guilty and 43 voted not guilty.
7 Republican senators joined all 50 senators in the Democratic caucus in voting to convict.
That was the largest bipartisan vote ever cast for conviction in a presidential impeachment trial, but it still fell short.
With 100 senators voting, conviction required 67 votes. Trump was acquitted for the second time.
Okay, when you look at all 4 impeachments together, one pattern becomes obvious. Removing a president is deliberately difficult.
The framers of the Constitution did not want Congress to be able to remove a president merely because lawmakers disliked him or disagreed with his policies. It's not a parliamentary vote of no confidence.
And that's why the House can impeach with a simple majority, but the Senate requires a much more demanding two-thirds majority in order to convict.
In practice, that usually means members of the president's own political party must vote against him in substantial numbers.
And that has never yet happened on the scale necessary for conviction.
Johnson came extraordinarily close. Clinton wasn't close. Trump's first trial wasn't close. And Trump's second trial produced a majority for conviction, but still not the constitutionally required two-thirds. Now, let's talk about Richard Nixon. There's one president who is often mistakenly described as having been impeached.
Yeah, Nixon was at the center of the Watergate scandal, which involved the 1972 break in at Democratic National Committee headquarters and the subsequent White House cover up.
By the summer of 1974, evidence increasingly showed that Nixon had participated in efforts to obstruct the investigation and pay off the criminals. The House Judiciary Committee approved 3 articles of impeachment.
They charged Nixon with obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress.
At that point, Republican congressional leaders told Nixon that he had lost much of his remaining support and probably could not survive either impeachment or a Senate trial.
So Nixon resigned on August 9th, 1974. Brief personal note, I was there the day he left with my mother. I was just a baby at the time, but she often talks about watching him leave.
Wow. And that happened before the full House voted on impeachment. So technically, Richard Nixon was never impeached. He left office before it could take place.
Yeah. Ironically, Nixon may have come closer to actual removal than any president who was formally impeached.
So the record stands like this.
Andrew Johnson was impeached once, acquitted. Bill Clinton was impeached once. He was acquitted. Donald Trump impeached twice, and he was acquitted both times.
4 presidential impeachments, 3 presidents, and no president ever removed from office by the Senate.
Richard Nixon came close, but he resigned before the House could impeach him.
And Donald Trump remains the only American president ever impeached more than once.
Impeachment is therefore both a legal process and an intensely political one. The Constitution gives Congress the power to remove a president for serious misconduct, but it intentionally sets the bar extremely high.
History shows us just how high.
More than 2 centuries of American presidents, 4 impeachments, and still not a single president removed through the process.
Hey, listen, thank you very much for tuning in today. Appreciate it. Please give us a like, give us comments, and subscribe too. We've got a lot of other good things coming your way.
Yes, come back and see us, folks. Bye for now.
Bye bye.